So here's what we did today, and where we were. The city of Green Bay, and right up here is a place called the Red Banks Alvar State Natural Area. We drove in, here's Highway 57, Sturgeon Bay Road, going up to Door County. We went on Gibson and parked right about here. And let me just roughly draw out the path that we took today. So we parked here, and we walked in this way. I believe we followed this creek generally back to the lot line, and then across, and then over here, and explored this way and back, and generally came back this way. So it was something like that. Not exactly. Couple of things I'm going to point out. Here's the aerial photo. So there are the clearings that we looked at. There's sort of the dense, mostly red cedar areas. This cutting through here is the power line. Here, of course, is the freeway. I mentioned those cracks in the bedrock that we find. Those are visible on this elevation map here, this LiDAR map. You can see right here and here. Those are those crevasses or cracks and fractures in the bedrock that some of them are large enough for you to potentially fall into. And a couple other things. That site that I thought may have been a mound or a grave of some kind, I believe that was right in this area. I didn't mark that exactly. I also mentioned the old farmstead, which was owned by Michael Kramer. This is the 1889 plat map. And actually this red line, let me clear this because we did walk right across the location of where Mr. Kramer's homestead was, and we found what appeared to be the old well, which was covered up so nobody fell into it. But that was visible in 1889, 1900. The property was owned by a Mr. Schilling, but the building is still shown as being there. However, by 1938, there really is no building that I can see at that time. So it looks like the farm building or home or cabin or whatever it was that is gone by 1938. So yeah, that's where we go today. All right, so welcome back to my channel. Today, Sonny and I are at a place called the Red Banks Alvar State Natural Area. It's about it's over 200 acre chunk of land that is owned by the Northeast Wisconsin Land Trust. So we enjoy these properties because, well, I mentioned it's 200 acres, but even surrounding it, there really isn't anything here. So it's one of those places for us close to home where we can get out and actually feel like we're somewhat remote. A highway does cut through the property over on the sort of west of where we are right now. That is Highway 57, which goes up to Door County. And but it's I guess the first thing I'll start with is, what's an Alvar? A-L-V-A-R. And it is sort of a unique type of environment. It's characterized by having very shallow soil. So there's hardly any soil here at all. And then you've got limestone, flat limestone bedrock underneath this. So it's never been, even in, 100 years ago, never really would have been good for agriculture. The soil's just too shallow, and I've seen some evidence back here that someone may have tried farming this. We might get to that in a little while, but it has pretty much been set aside as wild land as far as I know. There was on I'll show you the maps in a bit. There was a building or possibly a home shown actually close to where we're standing right now, coming in off of Gibson, where there was a home or some kind of a building that showed up in the 1800s in this area. And I'm not sure if that was a farmhouse or something else, but since then anyway, it really hasn't been much. Now, in recent years, the Northeast Wisconsin Land Trust did recently acquire quite a bit of additional acreage here from private ownership. In fact, the land we're on right now was just acquired by the land trust within the last couple of years or year or so. And what this had been used for prior to that, I believe, is primarily just hunting land. I think people would let, maybe even for a fee, I'm not sure, but it was, you know, deer hunting and other sorts of hunting activities here. And it's still open for hunting. It's just not under private ownership anymore. So there are a few things more that I want to mention about the Alvar type environment. One is that, yes, as you can see, they are often quite wet as well. We're walking very carefully. I don't want to get my feet wet just yet. There's another, if you look at the Wisconsin DNR, or just put in Google, put in the Red Banks Alvar, A-L-V-A-R, put Red Banks in front of it, you'll get a hit on the Wisconsin DNR's website, and they'll describe what's unique about this property with some more details. But one of them is, in the Midwest, this is known, I guess if you're a snail expert, land snails, this is one of the most diverse communities in the Midwest for land snails specifically. Well, I don't know specifically what species or anything like that, but I do remember when the Highway 57 was expanded, they put in a wider road going up to Door County, probably about 15 years ago now. But I remember the discussion then of how to protect these land snails. And one of the interesting things they did on the freeway or on the highway is if I recall, they put tunnels underneath the highway that allow the land snails to move from the habitat that's up higher here on this higher part of the Alvar and then down the Niagara Escarpment. We are up on the Niagara Escarpment, and if you don't know what that is, you can search that up in Google as well. So anyway, land snails, kind of an interesting thing. The trees here, we've been kind of grooving on trees a lot lately in the recent videos. There's a lot of red cedar, probably a few oaks. None are spectacularly large, but that does not mean they're young trees. Sonny, come over here. Sonny, this way. Sonny, hey, come on. She's wandering off. She doesn't want to go through this wet area here, and frankly, neither do I. So here's some of that shallow bedrock. It almost looks like it's pavement, but it's not. It's not paved by a human. That's paved by God, I guess you could say. It's bedrock, limestone or dolomite bedrock. So anyway, the trees here, well, they may not be large. You watched the video from about a week ago where we visited the Weequahic Creek area, and we found some pretty spectacular white oak trees, one of which I measured. And by the way, I estimate the age of that white oak tree to be at least 250 years old, possibly 300 or more years old. Hard to say for sure without counting rings and, something like that. But these trees here on the Alvar property, although they're not large like the one on the Weequahic Creek Natural Area, some of these may be actually much older than 250, 300 years old, because the cedar trees here, I mean, these are challenging environments for some of these cedars to grow, and they grow very, very slowly. And I know that, I don't know about here, but on the Niagara Escarpment south of us, there is a tree biologist and arborist. I'm not sure what his name was offhand, but he took some samples and figured out that tree south of us here in Brown County was over 1,200 years old. So 1,200-year-old tree. I'd like to try to find that tree someday. It is also on the Niagara Escarpment, as I might have mentioned. Now, I don't know that any of the trees up here are that old. I doubt it. But there are some oldies but goodies here. And I could have picked a colder day to be here, because we've had some warm weather lately, and a lot of the ice is thawed. It's January 16th, 2021, and a recent week or so, we've had some thawing. So I think Sunny and I are going to explore a little bit more, and we'll be back when we find some more interesting things. Sunny and I are working our way from that Gibson Lane access point towards the center of this 200-acre property. And here's one of those spots we've visited before where there's a rock pile. And to me, this looks like a gathering of rocks, you know, some humans put here. This is where I started to wonder, you know, the only reason I know of for people to put this much effort into a rock pile like this was to clear this land for agriculture, to, you know, remove the rocks, to allow the farm machinery and so forth to work this soil without getting caught up with boulders. But again, it's very surprising to me that anybody would have tried to farm this, just because the soil is so shallow, and even despite this thin layer of soil, it's still also very wet. It just seems like it would be an uphill battle to try to farm this. Some of the rocks you'll see here are what are called glacial erratics. So I mentioned this is a limestone or dolomite bedrock, you know, not far beneath our feet, but some of the rocks you see here are clearly igneous or metamorphic in nature. They're not limestone. And a glacial erratic, essentially, they call it an erratic because, you know, what is it doing here? You know, if these rocks were made from the local bedrock, they'd be limestone, just like what, you know, we have hundreds of feet of limestone bedrock beneath us. But these rocks on top of this limestone here were brought in by glaciers and dumped here. And then, of course, it looks to me like collected and moved into a pile by humans. They were likely spread out, you know, around us. And then some point in the future, some humans came along and piled them here. The trees here, some pretty gnarly, mostly cedar, I think red cedar. And I have no way of estimating the age of them, but probably some of them are pretty old. What do you think, Sunny? All right, she wants to keep going. So, Sunny and I have been on this property quite a few times over the years. And some people, you know, might walk through here and think, there's really nothing to see here. And that's, I mean, there's no valley or creek or spectacular scenery. It pretty much looks like this. But again, one of the reasons Sunny and I like to come here, well, that I like to come here, is even though we're within a few miles or so of my home, it's one of those pieces of public land where within a few minutes we can be sort of in a location where you don't see anything or anybody, and it's as close to sort of getting back into the wild as I can without traveling far from my home. Yes, I said into the wild, so I guess cue the Eddie Vedder soundtrack. But yeah, it's just a nice place to sort of get away and let Sunny be a dog, let her sniff around, and hopefully we'll see some wildlife of some kind here. Haven't really seen anything yet, but we'll see. So just to the north of that survey section corner that I mentioned, we find here where just enough of the water gathers and starts to flow to form the small creek. And I think we'll follow this down, because I think when we get closer to the ledge, as they call it, that there's enough water in here today. There might be a nice little waterfall, and I have not been to that little falls yet. I've seen this creek before, but have never seen the falls, and let's see if we can find that. Just a bit of a rapids, but further ahead downstream, I think we should find an even larger waterfall. I didn't measure what height that based on the topographic mapping, I don't know how high it will be, but I think there's going to be a pretty good drop coming up ahead here. Right, Sonny? Right, Dad? Right? Yeah. So we continue to follow this creek, and there were parts where both Sunny and I had no choice but to get our feet wet. And we're getting into a section here where the tree type does change. I see some birch trees in here after seeing pretty much nothing but these red cedars for a long time. The water in the creek here looks to be remarkably clear, and I can't think offhand if there's any of this watershed is farmland or something else, but there's not too many streams in this area that I would feel comfortable drinking water from. But the creek here actually, at least by appearance and smell, it looks like water I would actually consume. This nice big wetland, hundreds and hundreds of acres of wetland up here, really does a nice job of filtering out whatever crud might have came in here from a different area, but I doubt anything did. I believe this is snow melt, and I don't think there's runoff from any farm fields or anything else here. So that water's pretty nice. I've watched other YouTube hikers, and they're hiking on trails and so forth, and even some places in Wisconsin, you see them, they get thirsty, they find a creek, and they start drinking the water. And I just think, I don't think I'm going to do that. Not with what I know in terms of not most creeks. There's just too much pollution, and I have a good sense that a lot of that water would make you sick. I promised myself that I wouldn't wave the camera and move it around quite so much, because I have noticed in my other videos that sometimes as I'm swiveling my neck back and forth looking around, I'm doing the same thing with the camera, and that's really hard to watch later on. So keep the camera steady. I don't want to make you guys sick. Still have not found the waterfall or any of those bedrock fractures, but we'll keep searching. This is a little bit unique. Now, it might be completely natural, but if you were going to bury someone, you know, this is, I'm not sure if the camera's picking this up, but this is probably how you'd have to do it. Because again, there's solid bedrock just inches below the soil here. So you would have to pile things up a little bit in order to completely cover up the body. And I'm not saying this is a burial site, but it's not natural. The limestone bedrock you can see piled up on top, and then a very old cedar tree on top of it. But part of me wonders if this isn't some sort of a burial site or Indian mound or something like that. So we are right at about where the creek drops down, and there's no waterfall. It's just a bit of a rapids. We're also right on the property line. You might have noticed a stake here, and I don't want to accidentally wander off of the land trust property, so need to be careful of that. So again, we're right on the property line. The creek, actually there's two creeks that sort of come together right here in the woods on the property line. And yeah, they've got a nice little flow to them. Nothing spectacular. Not the rapids or waterfall that I had been hoping to find, but hey, I'm not sure if you can hear that. Sounds nice. Sonny's enjoying it. I've always thought Sonny would have made a good bird dog if I still hunted, because, you know, without training or anything, she just naturally stays in front of me. Most of the time she's doing kind of a zigzag pattern in front of me and, you know, kicks up whatever she can find. But Sonny's never been a hunting dog. Thought about picking up hunting again, like bird hunting, pheasant, whatever, but it's been too many years and just never really got around to that. She's a good dog. She's a good family dog, great with the kids, super friendly, sweetest dog you'll ever find, smart, and not a hunter. At least I don't have a gun with me, so she doesn't get to retrieve any birds that I might shoot. But she's happy just walking, sniffing around, as am I. We're back into some higher ground, yay. We are getting closer again to the freeway, and there is a small, I wouldn't call it a parking lot. You could probably park a couple of vehicles. So there's access to this property just off of Highway 57 when you come in. That's actually been the way Sonny and I usually enter this property. But again, since the land trust added some additional land to the other end of this, we parked on Gibson this time and we walked in that way. All right, so in here is where you start to see some of these bedrock. Oh, they're actually holes in the ground. This is a small one. Might not even go very far down, but it's not even flagged. But some of these other ones are big fractures, quite deep, that again, you need to be careful of. Don't want to slip and fall into one of those cracks. I will show you the topographic map, the LiDAR map, later on, unless I decide to splice it earlier in the video, but you can see there are a lot of those bedrock fractures, those cracks that exist in this area. This is a small one as well. But I know in years past, Sonny and I have encountered some that easily even a large human like me could, you know, fall quite a ways into, which would not be a very fun experience. So we're headed due south, going back towards the car. We're getting away from where some of those larger bedrock fractures are. Here's a, it looks deeper, but it's not very wide. I wouldn't fit in there. But I think if you look at that geology insight map that I showed a link of earlier, I have photos attached to a couple of spots. If you wanted to see some of the larger ones, larger fractures or crevasses, whatever you want to call them, you can click on those red X's on there and view the attached photos. I didn't find them today, at least not yet. No, just kidding. I didn't just fall into one. That was my little attempt at humor, but I'm not sure if that worked. Right, son? She didn't fall in one either. She's a smart dog, though. I'm not too worried about it. If you have a really stupid dog, I would suggest, you know, keeping a closer eye on it. If you're walking in here, you don't want your dog falling into one of those cracks. I think most dogs are smart enough to, they've got those instincts to stay away from those, but I know some dogs get excited. You know, they finally get out of the car off leash, get to a place like this, and just start running around like crazy without, you know, necessarily looking where they're going. So watch your pups when you're in here. Also, don't walk back here during hunting season. There are plenty of deer stands, evidence that quite a few hunters do come in here and to do deer hunting. And I certainly wouldn't let my dog that looks a little too much like a deer from a distance, and I'm wearing a brown coat with white on it right now, wouldn't be a very smart thing to do during deer season. So those of you who aren't into hunting, if you're watching this, if anyone's watching this, this is what's considered a ground blind. And someone just stacked up a bunch of branches to conceal themselves, put a bright pink chair in here along with dough and rut, some dew, a bucket, and hunkered down here for a while, hoping to shoot some deer. Now this is very much frowned upon. I don't like finding any of this stuff out here, but especially trash like this. Sonny kicked over the bucket. And it's January 16th. We're on the Northeast Wisconsin land trust property. People need to pick up their crap. That's disappointing to see. Most of this land is pretty, you know, it's fairly pristine. You don't find trash in too many places. So you get back into this newer part, well, newer, I mean newer in terms of recently acquired by the land trust. But there's at least one path you can follow. It's pretty rutted, but makes for a little bit of an easier walk. Not sure if bikes are okay in here, I would assume so. There's a few other human footprints here on this little path, but I haven't seen really any other human footprints in here at all today across most of the property. Not even a path on the part closer to the freeway. There's a smaller path. I didn't see any footprints in the snow there either. But yeah, this I believe was a path made for, you know, deer hunters to get back into their hunting stands and whatnot, and still likely is. But yeah, very easy walk. Thinking about taking my gravel bike out on here this summer, just because looks like it's easily bikeable with a mountain bike or gravel bike. Alright, still standing on the spot where I showed you the map. Where Mr. Kramer, Michael Kramer, may have had his farm buildings or whatever they were. And if I were to guess, this spot that Sonny and I are coming up on right here would have been the best place to put up buildings and see if we can find any ruins of any kind or any other artifacts here. I mean, there's solid bedrock right at the surface, right next to where I'm standing. So unbelievable that somebody would have tried to farm this. But maybe Mr. Kramer was using this land for something other than farming. Right up ahead of us, I see a pile of, looks like sheet metal or something. I don't think the building was present. I'll have to check the aerial photos from even the 1938 aerial photos that we have. I believe the building was showing up on there at that time. So, a little unusual that we would be seeing sheet metal like this, but this might be just covering up the mud, perhaps. You know, so nobody falls down into it. That is what this looks like. Maybe it was a well for drinking. Sonny, don't go hunting. For drinking water or something like that. So yeah, I think I am pretty close to the spot where this Kramer homestead may have been located back in 1889. I'll have to check. I don't recall either if it was still present in 1900. I don't see evidence of much else here. I'm gonna walk up on this spot right here. See what this is. Some rocks, shotgun shells. Again, if someday I get that metal detector, I might come back to a spot like this, see what I can find. You know, looking back on where we were just located by the old site of the Michael Kramer building from 1889, I have to give Mr. Kramer some credit. This might not be good land for growing crops, but as I'm thinking about this, plenty of open pasture land for animals to graze. I mean, this probably was not even forested back then, just again because of the shallow bedrock and trees not growing on this soil very well. But yeah, open pasture, plenty of water for the cattle to drink. Maybe this wasn't such a bad farm site after all.